"I'll buy her," growled the albino Alpha King, when her parents sold her away for being albino. Her silver hair, pale as frost, glimmered faintly in the dim light, marking her as different. The villagers whispered whenever she passed, their eyes heavy with fear or suspicion. Even her parents, who should have been her protectors, looked at her with a mix of shame and unease. "You will bring shame upon us if you stay," her father had muttered the night before, his voice low and hard. "There is only one way now. We must sell you." Lyra's heart had thudded painfully in her chest. Sell her. She had always known the villagers feared her albinism, but she had never imagined her own parents would give her away. Still, there was no protest. Fear and resignation weighed heavier than anger. She had learned long ago that resistance brought only more cruelty. The marketplace was shrouded in early morning mist, and the air smelled of damp earth, smoke, and strange spices. Hidden among the shadows were nobles and merchants, gathered not for food or goods, but for rarities, humans who were unusual, gifted, or feared. It was whispered that some of these purchases were not merely for service, but for power, influence, or even amusement. Lyra's stomach tightened with dread as she was led toward the auction. The auctioneer, a tall man with a crooked smile, called out her qualities to the sparse crowd. His voice was sharp and practiced. A rare albino girl, scarcely seen outside whispers and rumors, young, clever, and full of potential, a curious prize for the right owner. Lyra's eyes darted to the crowd. Many turned away, unable to meet her gaze. A few men whispered among themselves, their eyes bright with greed. Her pulse raced, but she forced herself to stand tall. She would not give them the satisfaction of fear. Then he appeared, Kale, the albino Alpha King. Even at a distance, his presence commanded attention. Pale as marble, with eyes like molten silver, he moved with a predator's grace, yet there was an air of calm precision in his steps. Whispers of his name fluttered through the crowd. He was feared, even hated, in equal measure. His castle lay atop the misted mountains, a place said to be as dangerous as it was beautiful. Legends spoke of his power, his cunning, and the shadow of a curse that lingered over his family line. Lyra had never imagined she would meet him, and yet here he was, walking straight toward her, as if the world itself had cleared a path. The auctioneer's voice faltered slightly. "Ah, the king himself. A rare honor." Kale's gaze met Lyra's, and something strange happened. The fear she expected did not rise in her chest. Instead, there was recognition. Not recognition of rank or power, but of something else, something unspoken. A mirrored reflection of difference, isolation, and survival. Without a word, Kale stepped into the bidding. His voice was low, rich, and commanding. "I'll buy her." A hush fell over the marketplace. The other nobles murmured, surprised, and a few exchanged worried glances. To Kale, most things were mere trinkets, bought or commanded with ease. Yet this girl, she sparked something unfamiliar. Not ownership, not amusement, something quieter, subtler, a challenge, perhaps, or a promise of change. Lyra's heart thundered, a mix of relief, fear, and curiosity. Kale's gaze was steady, unblinking, yet there was no cruelty there. Instead, there was understanding. She could not name it, but she felt it deep in her chest, like a spark in the dark. Her parents, however, were eager to close the deal. "Do it," her father said, his voice trembling with greed and fear. "Take her, king, she will bring you luck." Kale's lips curled into the faintest of smiles, almost imperceptible. "She is not a trinket," he said quietly, so only she could hear. Then he paid the gold, and the transaction was done. Lyra's legs felt weak as Kale extended a hand. She hesitated, then took it, drawn by some unnameable trust. The marketplace seemed to vanish around them as they moved through the mist toward the shadowed mountains, where Kale's castle waited, shrouded in cloud and legend. The journey was long, winding through forests thick with fog and rivers that glittered like silver under the first light of dawn. Lyra walked beside Kale, not speaking, but watching. She noticed how he seemed to move with purpose, each step measured, as if he were in constant conversation with some invisible force. She wondered what life must be like to carry such weight, the weight of a kingdom, of fear, and of a curse no one dared speak aloud. Finally, the castle emerged from the mist, a towering structure of black stone, adorned with twisted spires and silver carvings that shimmered in the pale light. It was beautiful and terrifying, like a dream conjured from both awe and fear. Kale turned to her and she realized she had been holding her breath. "Welcome," he said simply. His voice carried both command and an unexpected gentleness. "This is where your new life begins." Inside, the castle was vast and silent, corridors stretching farther than Lyra could see. Shadows seemed to cling to the walls, shifting with an almost sentient motion. Servants and guards passed quickly, avoiding their eyes. Lyra felt small in the immense halls, yet she could not deny a strange thrill at the strangeness of it all. Kale led her to her chambers, a room of dark wood and silver tapestries, faintly smelling of incense and old stone. A fire flickered in the hearth, though the room remained cool, the shadows stretching long and alive. "You will have freedom here," Kale said, his tone firm yet not harsh. "But there are rules. Obey them and you will live well. Disobey and, well, you will see the consequences." Lyra nodded, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. She sensed that Kale's words carried truth beyond their surface, and that this castle, though magnificent, held dangers she could not yet understand. That night, as she lay in her bed, Lyra watched the moonlight filtering through the tall windows, reflecting off her pale skin. She thought of her parents who had traded her for gold and ease. She thought of Kale, whose presence had shifted something deep inside her. Fear and curiosity twisted together, forming a tight knot in her chest. And then she heard it, a soft sound, almost a whisper coming from the shadows of the castle. She sat up, heart pounding. The shadows seemed to move of their own accord, twisting and stretching, forming shapes that were both terrifying and beautiful. Lyra felt a shiver of recognition. The castle, the shadows, Kale himself, all seemed alive, aware, waiting. Somewhere deep inside, she understood one thing with certainty. She had not been brought here to serve, nor simply to exist. She had been brought here for something greater, something dangerous, something that would test her courage, her mind, and her heart. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, carrying with it whispers of a curse older than the kingdom itself. Kale stood on the balcony, watching the moon rise over the dark lands, and Lyra knew, even from her bed, that he could see everything, every corner of his kingdom, every secret in the night. And she also knew, with a strange mix of fear and wonder, that her life was no longer her own. The night deepened, shadows curling around the castle like living things, and Lyra closed her eyes, holding on to the faint hope that the king, terrifying, powerful, and unknowable, was not her enemy. Somewhere in the depths of the castle, Kale murmured a single word, almost lost in the wind. "She is like me." Lyra's eyes fluttered open. The words were not meant for her, yet somehow she felt them strike straight to her heart. She did not know what lay ahead, danger, intrigue, or darkness, but she knew one thing. In the albino king she had found a mirror of her own solitude, and perhaps a chance at something she had never dared to imagine: belonging. And the shadows seemed to watch, patient and endless, as if the castle itself awaited the first move in a story that had only just begun. The morning light barely touched the castle when Lyra awoke. The shadows of the previous night still lingered in the corners of her room, curling like dark smoke. She rose quietly, her feet brushing against the cool stone floor. Outside her window, the mountains were draped in mist, and the first hints of sunlight struggled through gray clouds. Kale was already gone. The soft echo of his footsteps had faded hours ago, leaving a silence that seemed heavier than the walls themselves. Lyra dressed slowly, her mind filled with a mixture of awe and unease. The castle was beautiful, yes, but it was also alive in a way she had never known. The walls whispered, the shadows moved. And somewhere in the depths of the halls, Kale's presence lingered like a storm cloud ready to break. When she stepped into the corridor, she realized she was not entirely alone. Servants moved silently, eyes downcast, as if they feared the very air around her. She remembered Kale's words, "Obey the rules and you will live well, disobey and you will see the consequences." It had not been a threat exactly, it was a promise. The first lesson came that morning, though not in the way she expected. Kale summoned her to the library, a vast hall filled with ancient books, scrolls, and artifacts. The walls were lined with silver and black carvings, depicting battles, kings, and beings whose faces were half-shadowed. The air smelled of parchment and smoke, heavy with knowledge older than the kingdom itself. "You will learn to see the world differently," Kale said, his voice echoing against the high ceiling. "The castle is not just stone and fire. It is alive. It watches. It judges. And so must you." Lyra tried to meet his gaze. It was unnerving, that calm, piercing silver that seemed to look right into her soul. She nodded, unsure whether she understood him fully. Kale began to teach her subtle ways to read people, the tilt of a head, the flicker of an eye, the tension in a hand. "Power is not always about strength," he said. "Sometimes it is knowing what is hidden and knowing how to use it without showing it." Lyra listened, absorbing each word, though she felt overwhelmed. Her mind was not yet trained to see through the illusions of men and nobles, but she tried. In Kale's presence, every movement felt meaningful, every word heavy with intention. It was exhausting and exhilarating at the same time. Days passed in a rhythm of instruction and exploration. Kale led her through hidden corridors, secret stairways, and gardens where silver-leaved trees glimmered with dew. He showed her ancient artifacts and whispered stories of her bloodline, though always with caution. Lyra learned that being albino in this kingdom was not just a mark of fear, but of potential. Those born pale were rare, capable of seeing things others could not. One afternoon, as they walked through a greenhouse filled with orchids that shimmered like moonlight, Lyra stopped and looked at Kale. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Why did you buy me?" Kale's gaze softened, though a shadow lingered in his silver eyes. "Because you are like me," he said, "alone, feared, misunderstood, and yet strong in ways others cannot see." Lyra felt her chest tighten. She had spent her life being treated as weak, as cursed. To hear someone, especially the albino king, call her strong was both thrilling and frightening. She wanted to believe him, but old doubts lingered. Could she trust him? Could anyone trust someone so powerful, so feared? The castle itself seemed to answer her questions in strange ways. Shadows moved along the walls, stretching unnaturally, as if alive. Sometimes she thought she heard whispers in the stone, words that were almost audible, teasing her with secrets just out of reach. Kale noticed her unease. "You will grow used to it," he said. "The castle tests all who enter. It learns your fears before you do, and it will not forgive weakness." Lyra swallowed hard. She realized that her life here would be a test, not just of obedience, but of courage, wit, and spirit. She did not yet understand the full depth of what Kale had promised her, or what danger awaited. Then, one evening, the first true test came. A banquet was held in the main hall, attended by nobles and dignitaries from across the kingdom. Lyra followed Kale, her heart pounding as she passed under the grand chandeliers, their light bouncing off silver carvings of kings and warriors. The hall was beautiful, but every eye seemed to weigh her, as if measuring whether she belonged. Whispers followed her. "The girl the king bought." Lyra held her head high, though each word pricked at her pride. Kale's presence beside her was a steadying force, and she drew strength from it. She noticed the subtle gestures he made, a hand on her back, a slight protective tilt, and it made her heart beat faster. She did not yet understand what she felt, but she sensed it was dangerous and beautiful. Halfway through the banquet, an older noble approached her, a man known for his cruelty and suspicion. "You think you belong here, girl?" he sneered. "Do you know what it means to serve a king? To survive his court, Lyra straightened, her voice surprisingly steady. I do not wish to serve, I wish only to live and learn. The noble laughed, a sound harsh and sharp, but before he could speak further, Kale intervened. His voice, low and commanding, froze the hall in silence. She does not serve. She stands because she chooses to, and I will not have her questioned in my presence. The noble faltered, and the other guests murmured in awe. Lyra's pulse raced, not from fear, but from the rush of being defended, protected, and recognized. Kale's eyes met hers, and she saw in them a mixture of warning and encouragement. That night, Lyra returned to her chamber, exhausted but filled with a new awareness. She realized that life in the castle was not merely survival, it was a lesson in understanding power, trust, and fear. Kale had not simply purchased her, he had chosen her for a reason she could not yet grasp. Days turned into weeks. Lyra trained in the library, learning languages, history, and the subtle arts of influence. She learned to sense moods and intentions, to read lies as easily as truth. Kale continued to watch her progress, sometimes stern, sometimes approving. And though he never said it aloud, Lyra felt a bond forming, unspoken but undeniable. One evening, Kale brought her to the edge of the balcony overlooking the mountains. The wind was sharp, cold enough to sting, and the sky was a swirl of silver clouds and pale starlight. Below, the forest seemed endless, and the rivers glimmered faintly like threads of light. You are learning faster than I expected, Kale said, his voice almost a whisper. But power is not only knowledge, it is choice. And soon, your choices will matter more than your training. Lyra turned to him, feeling a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. What kind of choices? She asked. Kale's eyes darkened. Choices that will define not just your life but the lives of others. Choices that may awaken forces you cannot yet imagine. A strange chill ran through Lyra. The castle felt different tonight, almost alive, as if aware of the conversation, as if listening. Shadows stretched long and twisted along the walls, flickering in the torchlight. She wondered if Kale felt it too, the weight of unseen eyes watching from corners and heights beyond the human eye. Then came the first true sign of her emerging power. While walking in the moonlit garden, Lyra felt a strange pull in her chest. She looked at a withered vine curling around a stone fountain. The vine shivered, then slowly began to bloom, small silver flowers opening as if touched by unseen hands. She gasped, and Kale, who had been walking silently behind her, placed a hand on her shoulder. You see it, he said quietly, your gift, the one I knew you had even before we met. You can sense what is hidden. Not everyone can, few ever master it. Lyra's heart raced. She had felt different all her life, feared and shunned, but now she realized her difference was not a curse. It was a gift, and Kale, in his quiet, commanding way, was the only one who seemed to understand it, yet fear lingered. She knew the gift could draw danger as easily as protection. The castle was filled with secrets, and not all of them would welcome her power. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought of her parents, her village, and the world she had left behind. And she thought of Kale, the albino king who had bought her not for profit, but for something he could not yet name, something like hope. Outside, the castle whispered. The shadows moved, alive and patient. And somewhere in the distance, a wind carried a warning she could almost understand. The true trials were only beginning. The castle was alive with whispers that day, low and shifting like the wind through the mountains. Lyra had grown accustomed to the corridors, the towering arches, and the endless stairways, but she could feel a tension in the air that made the hair on her arms stand. Something was stirring, something she could not yet name. The nobles gathered in the great hall were more cautious than usual. Eyes darted to Kale as he entered and then to her. Whispers passed like currents in a river, carrying fear, suspicion, and occasionally envy. She had begun to notice these subtle currents, learning from Kale's lessons how to read them, yet even she felt the weight of their attention pressing against her. Kale, pale and commanding, moved with his usual grace, but there was a shadow in his silver eyes she had not seen before. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but she felt it, a quiet tension that set her nerves alight. During the midday banquet, as servants brought platters of roasted meat and fruits, an unexpected guest arrived. Lord Varick, a noble whose family had long sought to undermine Kale. His eyes were cold and calculating, and the moment they rested on Lyra she sensed a hidden malice. "You have brought an unusual companion, your majesty," he said, his words sharp and slow. "Does she truly belong here?" Kale's gaze turned toward him, steady and unyielding. "She belongs because I say she does," he replied, his voice carrying across the hall. The noble faltered under the weight of Kale's command, and the other guests murmured, sensing the silent threat in his tone. Lyra's heart pounded, but she held herself upright. She had been trained to read these moments, to notice fear and intention. Yet something about Lord Varick unsettled her. He was clever and dangerous, the type of man who hid venom behind civility. That night, Lyra could not sleep. The shadows in her room seemed restless, stretching toward the corners, as if eager to whisper secrets she was not yet ready to hear. Kale's absence left a hollow echo in the chambers, and she realized how much his presence had anchored her in this strange, shifting castle. The next morning, Kale found her in the library, staring at an old map of the kingdom. "You are restless," he observed, placing a hand on the edge of the table. His touch was steadying, yet the tension in his shoulders betrayed his own unease. "I can feel something wrong," Lyra said quietly. "Something in the castle and the nobles. There is danger." Kale's eyes narrowed. "You are perceptive," he said. "That is why you are here, but perception alone is not enough. You must learn to act." He guided her to the courtyard, where sunlight filtered through tall stone arches. There, he demonstrated not just physical skill, but the subtle movements of authority, a glance that could command, a gesture that could protect or warn. Lyra tried to mimic him, her muscles aching, her mind alert to every detail. Over the days that followed, Kale began to share more of the truth about his family's curse. Long ago, a shadow had been cast upon their bloodline, a curse that threatened destruction if albino heirs combined their powers recklessly. Lyra's presence, he admitted, was part of that reckoning. He did not wish harm for her, but the prophecy left little room for certainty. Lyra's pulse quickened. She had feared her difference all her life, but now it was not just difference, it was power. And power, she realized, carried danger. The first true challenge arrived sooner than expected. A royal messenger appeared at the castle gates, bearing a sealed letter. Kale read it, his expression darkening. The letter warned that Lord Varick and his allies were planning something within the castle, a betrayal designed to exploit Lyra's unique gifts and turn her against Kale. Lyra felt a tight knot of fear in her chest, but Kale's hand on her shoulder steadied her. "They think to manipulate you," he said softly. "Do not let them. Your strength lies in knowing who you are and what you can do." That night, while the moon cast silver light across the courtyard, Lyra wandered among the shadowed fountains and glowing flowers. She tried to sense the danger Kale had spoken of, reaching for her own emerging power. The garden seemed to respond, a breeze whispered through the trees, and the flowers shimmered faintly, as if acknowledging her presence. Kale appeared silently behind her, his cloak brushing against the stone. "You feel it," he said. "The whispers, the currents, you are learning." Lyra turned to him, eyes wide. "Am I ready?" Kale shook his head slightly, a rare vulnerability in his gaze. "No." "And yet you will have to face it. Courage is not knowing you will survive. It is choosing to act even when you cannot be certain." The very next day, the castle erupted into chaos. During a midday council meeting, Lord Varick attempted to accuse Kale of misrule, spreading lies about the girl the king had purchased. Lyra watched, heart pounding, as the nobles whispered, some turning their eyes to her with suspicion, others with envy. Then came the trap. Varick had hidden a small vial, filled with a strange, swirling shadow liquid among the ceremonial objects. He intended to poison Kale during the proceedings. Lyra's instincts flared. Without thinking, she reached out with her gift, sensing the malice and danger before it fully took form. The vial trembled in Varric's hand, then shattered harmlessly on the stone floor. The hall fell silent. Every eye turned to Lyra, awe and shock mixing in their gazes. Kale's eyes were fixed on her, a mixture of pride, fear, and something more he had not yet named. "You are not merely a child," he said, his voice low but carrying across the room. "You are capable of more than they can imagine." Varric fled, humiliated and enraged, leaving whispers and tension in his wake. Lyra's heart raced, her palms cold. She had saved Kale, and in doing so, revealed a part of herself she had only begun to understand. That night, Kale led her to the balcony overlooking the mountains once more. The sky was dark, the stars glittering like silver embers. Lyra could feel the wind biting at her cheeks, but she welcomed it, letting it clear her mind. "You did well today," Kale said, his voice softer than usual. "But this is only the beginning. The curse in my bloodline it stirs, and your power, as rare as it is, will attract attention we cannot ignore." Lyra turned to him, a mixture of awe and fear in her eyes. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she said. "I only want to protect you." Kale studied her, his silver eyes reflecting the moonlight. "And you will, but protection is not always simple. Choices will be made that test your heart, your courage, and your loyalty. Some will try to manipulate you, some will try to break you. But remember, strength is not the absence of fear, it is acting in spite of it." The night deepened, and the shadows seemed to stir more vividly than before. Lyra realized that the castle itself was alive, watching and testing them both. She felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with dread. Days later, as the winds howled through the mountains, the first true betrayal struck. A trusted servant, secretly allied with Lord Varric, attempted to lure Lyra into the hidden dungeons beneath the castle. She had been warned, but the servant was cunning, weaving half-truths with the threat of danger to Kale. Lyra's senses flared. She felt the darkness before it could fully form, and in the narrow hallways of the castle, she turned the trap back upon the servant, using subtle gestures and whispers only Kale had taught her to distract and capture him. She held him trembling as he realized the plan had failed. Kale appeared silently, his expression unreadable. "You are learning fast," he said, "faster than I expected, but do not let pride blind you. Every victory brings new challenges. Every shadow hides another secret." Lyra nodded, heart still racing. She realized that life in the castle was a delicate dance of perception, power, and courage. She had begun to trust herself and, slowly, Kale. She could feel the bond forming between them, unspoken but undeniable. Yet she knew the danger was far from over. That night, she stood alone on the balcony, looking over the misty mountains. The wind whispered through the peaks, carrying voices she could not fully hear. The castle loomed behind her, alive with shadow and intrigue. And somewhere deep inside, Lyra knew that the trials ahead would demand everything she had: her courage, her power, and perhaps her heart. The wind tore across the castle walls that morning, carrying a chill that cut deeper than any sword. Lyra stood on the balcony, her silver hair streaming behind her, eyes fixed on the mountains shrouded in mist. Something stirred in the distance, a dark presence that seemed to pulse like a living thing. She could feel it in her chest, in her hands, a warning that the calm of the castle had ended. Kale approached silently, his cloak brushing against the stone floor. His silver eyes were sharper than ever, scanning the horizon with a predator's precision. "The time has come," he said quietly. "They are coming, and the curse will awaken if we are not ready." Lyra swallowed, her fingers tightening on the railing. The lessons, the training, and the whispers in the castle had prepared her, but the weight of what was to come pressed down like a mountain. "I am ready," she said, though her voice betrayed a flicker of fear. Cale studied her, his gaze lingering, not with doubt but with something warmer, trust. "We face this together," he said. "Do not forget that. Whatever comes, we are bound by more than choice. We are bound by understanding." The first attack came at dusk. Shadows poured into the castle from hidden corridors, moving like smoke, shapes twisting and coiling with intent. Lyra felt their malice before she saw them, a ripple of darkness that tugged at her senses. She rushed to Cale's side, the lessons of the past weeks guiding her every move. Together, they moved through the halls, Lyra sensing danger and Cale striking with precision. Every shadow that approached seemed drawn to her light, to the silver of her hair, as though the very curse had marked her as a target. But she did not falter. The bond she felt with Cale gave her strength, a tether anchoring her in the storm of darkness. In the grand hall they faced Lord Varric himself, standing with allies cloaked in shadows, their eyes glinting with malice. "You think you are safe here," Varric sneered. "The castle itself will turn against you. The curse will consume you both." Lyra stepped forward, her hands raised, her senses reaching out. She could feel the flow of energy through the hall, the pulse of power that connected the walls, the stones, and even the shadows themselves. Slowly she began to guide it, bending the currents of magic toward their side. Silver light shimmered from her fingers, illuminating the hall and reflecting in Cale's eyes. Cale struck with the precision of a king and a warrior, disarming the intruders with skill and control. Lyra's power flowed beside his, subtle but formidable. Together they were a force that none of Varric's allies could match. The battle was not easy. Shadows clawed at their minds, trying to sow fear, doubt, and discord. Lyra felt moments of hesitation, visions of her parents' betrayal and the fear of failing Cale. But Cale's presence was a constant reminder. She was not alone. "You are stronger than you know," he whispered, as he deflected an attack meant for her. "Trust yourself." In that instant, Lyra's doubt vanished. Her power surged and the shadows recoiled, twisting in pain and confusion. The silver light from her hands expanded, filling the hall, and one by one, Varric's allies fell back, defeated not by force alone, but by the combination of courage, skill, and trust. Finally, only Varric remained, cornered in the center of the hall. He raised his hands, desperation in his eyes. "This is not over. The curse will awaken. You cannot escape it." Cale stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on Lyra's shoulder. "No curse can destroy what is united by choice and trust," he said. His voice carried the weight of the castle itself, and Lyra felt it as a force that anchored her to the moment. Lyra extended her hands, and the silver light enveloped Varric, but not to harm him. Instead, it revealed the truth, the fear, envy, and darkness in his heart. Varric fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the clarity of what he had tried to do. Lyra's power did not punish, it revealed. When the light faded, the hall was silent except for the echoes of footsteps and the hum of magic still lingering in the stones. Varric and his followers had been defeated, not destroyed, but humbled. The castle seemed to breathe, a deep sigh of relief moving through its ancient walls. Cale turned to Lyra, his silver eyes soft but fierce. "You have done more than survive," he said. "You have mastered not just your gift but your courage. You have faced fear and choice, and you have chosen wisely." Lyra's heart raced. "I could not have done it without you," she admitted. "You taught me, guided me, and trusted me." Cale stepped closer, the space between them charged with unspoken words. "I have watched you grow," he said quietly, "and I have learned from you as well. You have changed the way I see the world and myself." A pause lingered, heavy with meaning. Lyra realized that this bond, forged in shadow, danger, and trust, had become something neither of them could deny. Something like hope, or perhaps love, tempered by respect and shared struggle. That night they stood together on the balcony, looking over the mountains and the forests beyond. The stars shimmered, silver like her hair, and the wind carried the scent of earth, stone, and distant snow. For the first time, Lyra felt a sense of belonging not just in the castle, but in the life she had chosen alongside Kale. "You have faced more than most ever will," Kale said, his voice low, carrying across the balcony. "But there is one truth you must remember. Power, courage, and trust are never static. They grow, change, and must always be renewed." Lyra nodded, understanding. She had grown stronger, yes, but she also knew that challenges would continue to arise. The castle, the kingdom, and even the curse still held mysteries yet to be revealed, but for the first time she felt ready to meet them. Kale reached out, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "You are no longer the girl I purchased," he said softly. "You are my equal. My partner, my strength." Lyra felt warmth flood her chest, a lightness she had never known. "And you," she whispered, "are not just the king. You are my mirror, my guide, my courage." They stood together in silence, the wind wrapping around them, carrying the promise of a future they would face side by side. The castle behind them was quiet now, its stones reflecting the triumph of their combined courage. Yet they both knew that its ancient walls had many secrets still, waiting to be discovered. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky with silver and gold, Lyra realized that the true victory was not the defeat of Varric or the survival of the castle. It was the realization that she had found her place in a world that had once feared her, and that she had chosen to stand beside someone who saw her for who she truly was. The albino king, feared and alone for so long, finally smiled fully, not with pride, but with the quiet joy of understanding and connection. Lyra reached out and took his hand, and together they watched the sun rise over a kingdom that, though shadowed and full of danger, now held a promise of light. The wind carried a final whisper through the mountains, gentle and approving, as if the castle itself had acknowledged their triumph. Lyra and Kale, two souls shaped by difference, fear, and trust, had faced shadow and curse and emerged not just alive, but transformed. For the first time, the castle seemed less a place of testing and more a home, a kingdom where shadows could exist, but so could light, hope, and the bond between two hearts strong enough to defy even the oldest curses.